The telegram shook in Clara's hand like a rattlesnake ready to strike. Wedding cancelled. Do not come. James. She stood on that Laramie platform in a wedding dress she'd sewn with borrowed thread, watching strangers' eyes pick her apart, piece by piece. The train that brought her was already steaming away, and the man who'd promised forever had erased her with 9 words. She had $17, no family within 500 miles, and a choice: crumble or survive. Before we go further, if you want to see how Clara fights her way back from the edge, hit that subscribe button right now. And drop a comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Clara couldn't move. Her legs had turned to timber, rooted to the platform, while the September wind knifed through her lace sleeves. The telegram crinkled in her grip, the paper already damp from sweat, the ink starting to blur at the edges. Wedding cancelled. Do not come. James. 9 words. 3 years of letters, reduced to 9 words. The station bell clanged twice. Departure. Gone. Too late. You all right, miss? A woman in a green traveling suit stood 3 feet away, concern and curiosity fighting for control of her face. Behind her, 2 other women leaned in, eyes bright with the promise of scandal. Clara's throat locked. She managed a nod. The woman in green glanced at Clara's dress, the white silk with its careful stitching, the bustle crushed from 2 days of train benches, the hem already gray with soot. Her expression shifted from concern to something sharper. Knowing. I see, she said, though Clara hadn't spoken. Well, good luck to you. She walked away. The other women followed, whispering behind gloved hands. Clara stood there holding a telegram that weighed nothing and everything, while the platform emptied around her. Families reunited with shouts and embraces. A freight crew attacked a pile of Denver-marked crates with brutal efficiency. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders, turning the white silk hot enough to burn. She'd sewn this dress by candlelight in a Philadelphia boarding house, her fingers bleeding from pushing the needle through thick fabric. Her aunt had refused to help. You're making a mistake, girl, chasing some cowboy you've never met. So Clara had done it alone. 70 hours of work. $17 worth of fabric she couldn't afford. All for a man who'd decided she wasn't worth the trouble of a proper goodbye. The paper crackled as her fingers tightened. Think. You have to think. $17. A trunk full of clothes that marked her as someone's abandoned bride. An address for a boarding house 2 blocks south, copied from a newspaper meant for when she was Mrs. James Thornton, with a husband's income, and a town that didn't know her shame. Now, the station clerk appeared in the doorway, spectacles catching the light. Miss Whitfield. Not a question. An accusation wearing a polite mask. That your trunk? He pointed to a battered case near the freight pile. Yes. Need help moving it, or is someone meeting you? The question landed like a slap. Clara lifted her chin. I'm fine. Thank you. He shrugged and disappeared inside. The door banged shut. Clara walked to her trunk and sat down hard. The sun-warmed wood pressed against her thighs through the silk. Her mother had taught her to breathe through panic, in through the nose, out through the mouth, steady and slow. She tried it now. It didn't help. Move! Clara jerked upright. A freight man with arms like fence posts glared at her, a crate balanced on one shoulder. Sorry. She dragged her trunk 3 feet, left her hands shaking. He grunted and kept walking. That's when the shouting started. June Josie, get back here right now! 2 small bodies in calico dresses exploded through the freight crew like cannonballs. Identical brown braids flew behind them. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old, and they were laughing wild, joyful, completely unafraid. June Elizabeth Hart. Josie May. A man rounded the corner at a dead run. Tall, lean, dark hair that needed cutting. His face was tight with fury and fear in equal measure. He skidded to a stop between two luggage piles, breathing hard. The girls split up. One dodged left around a stack of crates. The other went right nimble as a rabbit. They moved like they'd rehearsed this escape 100 times. The man stopped, planted his hands on his hips. "You two are gonna be the death of me." "Papa, We're just." He didn't raise his voice. Somehow that was worse than yelling. "Get over here, both of you, now!" The girls slowed, circling him like wary cats. Clara watched, fascinated. The man didn't lunge, didn't chase. He just waited, and something in that stillness made both girls shuffle forward with their heads down. "What did I say before we left the ranch?" "Stay close," they mumbled together. "And what did you do?" "Ran." "Why?" Silence. Then the girl on the left looked up with enormous brown eyes. "Mrs. Hendricks said our braids was messy and we looked like wild Indians. We didn't want to hear no more." The man's jaw went tight as a lockbox. "Mrs. Hendricks doesn't get to decide what you look like, and you don't run where I can't see you, not ever. Understood?" "Yes, Papa." He sighed. Some of the tension left his shoulders. "Sit on that bench. Don't move." The girls scrambled to obey like they'd been pardoned from hanging. The man watched them for a long moment, making sure they'd stay put, then turned. His eyes landed on Clara. She froze. He didn't look away, didn't offer the embarrassed smile people usually gave when caught during a family moment. He studied her the way a rancher might study a horse, not unkind, but thorough. Assessing. Clara's spine straightened without permission. She'd been stared at all day by the porter who'd smirked by the women in the dining car, who'd whispered by the clerk, who'd practically called her a fool. But this was different. This man wasn't looking for scandal. He was looking for something else. "You need help, miss?" The question caught her off guard. "No, thank you." "You sure?" He glanced at her trunk, then back at her face. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds over mountains. "Station's closing soon. You got somewhere to be?" "I'm fine." "That dress says otherwise." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "My dress is none of your concern." "Fair enough." But he didn't walk away. "You got family in Laramie?" "No." "Work?" "Not yet." "Money?" Clara's hands clenched. "That's none of my business, I know." He tilted his head slightly. Not pity in his expression. Something closer to recognition. "But I've stood where you're standing. Different reasons, same look. And I'm guessing you've got about $10 in a plan that just fell through." 17, Clara said before she could stop herself. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Elias Hart. I run a cattle ranch 8 miles north. Those two—" He gestured toward the bench where the twins were now braiding each other's hair with grim determination. "Are mine. They need a governess. Someone to teach reading, writing, arithmetic. Keep them from running completely wild." Clara blinked. "You're offering me work." 2-week trial, room and board included. $1 a week to start, more if it works out. His voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing the price of feed. "You'd have your own space in the old bunkhouse separate from the main house. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, runs the household. She'll be there every day. No impropriety, no expectations beyond teaching." It sounded too convenient. Too easy. Clara's aunt had warned her about men who made offers like this, smooth words covering ugly intentions. "Why me?" Clara asked flatly. "You don't know anything about me." Elias Hart studied her for another moment. "I know you stepped off a train in a wedding dress with no groom waiting. I know you didn't cry or make a scene, even though you've got every right to both. And I know you're still standing." He paused. "Also, I watched you when my girls ran past. You didn't look at them like wild animals that needed taming. You looked interested. That's rare in a governess." Clara glanced at the twins. They'd abandoned the hair braiding and were now balancing on one foot, seeing who could last longer. One of them caught Clara watching and stuck her tongue out. Clara stuck her tongue out back. Both girls dissolved into giggles. Elias Hart's mouth definitely twitched this time. That's more than the last governess managed in a month. I'm not a governess, Clara said. I worked in a textile mill. I have no formal training. Can you read? Yes. Write? Yes. Do sums? Well enough? Then you're qualified. He crossed his arms. The sleeves of his work shirt were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms roped with muscle and marked with old scars. Working hands. Honest hands. Look, miss, I don't know your name. Whitfield. Clara Whitfield. Miss Whitfield. I won't pretend this is perfect. Ranch life is hard. My girls are energetic, that's the polite word for it. The house is still grieving my late wife. And Laramie's got plenty of people who like to talk. His voice stayed steady. But I'm offering honest work for honest pay, a place to sleep with a lock on the door, decent food, and time to figure out what comes next. Clara's throat felt tight. Why are you doing this? Something flickered across his face. Old pain carefully controlled. After my wife Sarah died 2 years back, I stood in almost this same spot, with 2 newborns and no idea what came next. Doc Morrison's wife gave me a choice: accept help or drown. I chose help. He met Clara's eyes. Those girls deserve better than another adult who gives up on them. And you deserve better than whatever happened to put you on that platform in a wedding dress. The station bell clanged once, warning that the evening train was due in an hour. Clara looked at her trunk, at her ruined dress, at the $17 that wouldn't last a week in a boarding house where the landlady would ask questions about the wedding ring that wasn't on her finger. She thought about James, about 3 years of letters promising forever, about the plans they'd made, about how she'd told her aunt that love was worth the risk. She'd been wrong about James, but maybe she could be right about this. 2 weeks, Clara said. Trial period. Either of us can walk away after that. No hard feelings. And Mrs. Chen will be there. Every day. She runs the kitchen, keeps the accounts, and doesn't suffer fools. But she's fair. Clara took a breath, then another. The telegram was still in her pocket, the edges starting to tear. Wedding canceled. James had made his choice. Now she'd make hers. All right, Clara said. 2 weeks. Elias Hart's shoulders relaxed barely, but enough to notice. Good. Let's get your trunk loaded. Girls. The twins jumped off the bench like springs released. Yes, Papa. This is Miss Whitfield. She's coming to the ranch to be your teacher. Both girls looked at Clara with identical expressions of deep suspicion. We don't need a teacher, one said. We already had 4, and they all left. 5 if you count Miss Peterson, who only lasted 3 days, the other added. Which is why Miss Whitfield gets a fair chance, Elias said firmly. You will be polite. You will listen. And you will not put frogs in her bed. We only did that once. Once was enough. Now help with this trunk. The girls grabbed one handle, while Elias took the other. They staggered toward a wagon parked near the freight platform, solid construction, pulled by 2 horses that looked better fed than half the people Clara had met today. Clara followed her boots loud on the wooden planks. Her dress caught every gust of wind, like it wanted to drag her backward. She didn't look at the station, didn't let herself think too hard about what she was walking toward. Elias and the girls heaved the trunk into the wagon bed with a thump. Then he turned and offered Clara his hand. She hesitated. Not because she didn't trust him, though she barely knew him, but because accepting felt like choosing a path she couldn't unchoose, like stepping off solid ground into water where she couldn't see the bottom. Miss Whitfield. His hand stayed steady. Patient. Clara took it. His grip was calloused and warm, exactly as firm as it needed to be. He helped her up onto the bench, then released her immediately and stepped back. The twins scrambled into the wagon bed, already arguing in fierce whispers about who got to sit closer to the trunk. Elias swung up beside Clara, keeping careful distance between them. He picked up the reins, clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward with the easy obedience of animals who knew their job. Laramie began to fall away. The station, the shops, the hotel, with its painted sign. Clara watched it recede, and with every step the horses took something in her chest loosened. Not relief. Not quite, but close. "The ranch is called Heart's Run," Elias said after a minute. "Named for the creek that cuts through the property. Water's reliable year-round matters more than gold out here. We run Herefords, about 200 head. The house is timber and stone, 4 bedrooms in the main house. Your space is in the old bunkhouse we converted, attached to the main house but separate, private." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Girls," Elias called over his shoulder. "Tell Miss Whitfield your names properly." "I'm June," one piped up. "June Elizabeth Hart. I'm older by 7 minutes." "I'm Josie May. June only remembers she's older when she wants first dibs." "Do not. Do too." "Girls." Just one word. The bickering stopped instantly. Clara glanced back. Both twins were watching her with expressions that mixed curiosity and challenge. That "I dare you to try to change me" look she recognized from her own mirror. "I like your braids," Clara said. June and Josie exchanged a glance. "Really?" June asked carefully. "Mrs. Hendricks said—" "Mrs. Hendricks is wrong," Clara interrupted. "Your braids are perfect." Another look between the twins, faster this time, almost conspiratorial. "Miss Whitfield," Josie said, "do you know any stories?" "A few." "Good ones, with adventures?" "Some." "What about scary ones?" "Josie," Elias warned. "I'm just asking." Clara felt something shift in her chest. "I know scary ones, but you'll have to earn them by learning your multiplication tables first." Both girls groaned in perfect unison. Elias's mouth quirked. "You're gonna fit right in." The wagon rolled north. The sun was dropping toward the mountains, painting the grass gold, and the sky shades of pink that Clara had only seen in paintings. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, with hints of sage and something warm she couldn't name. Leather from the rains, horse sweat, prairie dust, real smells. Honest smells. "Miss Whitfield." June's voice drifted from behind. "Yes. Did someone die?" "June?" Elias twisted in his seat, horrified. "You don't—" "It's all right." Clara looked back at the girls, at their wide eyes and brutally honest faces. "No. No one died. But something else ended. Something I thought would last." "Like when Mama died?" Josie asked quietly. Silence dropped over the wagon like a blanket. Elias's hands tightened on the reins. Clara could feel the weight of grief in the air. Old grief settled into the bones of this family. "A little like that," Clara said carefully. "Different, but yes." June nodded solemnly. "Papa says things end sometimes even when we don't want them to, but then other things start." "Your papa's right. He tries," Josie said, and there was something almost adult in her tone, a child who'd learned to comfort her father instead of the other way around. Clara's chest ached. She turned back to face forward, blinking hard. The wagon crested a rise, and the valley opened below them. Heart's Run sprawled in the hollow, a main house with smoke rising from the chimney, several outbuildings, corrals, and the creek running through it all like a silver thread. Cattle grazed in the distance. The mountains rose behind everything dark against the bleeding sky. "Home," Elias said simply. The horses picked up their pace, knowing they were close. The twins started singing something about a cowboy and his horse, off-key but enthusiastic. Elias didn't tell them to stop. Clara looked down at her hands, still wearing the gloves she'd put on in Philadelphia back when she thought she knew where her life was going. She pulled them off slowly and tucked them into her reticule. Her hands were bare now, ready for work. The wagon rolled down the slope. As they approached, Clara noticed a figure standing on the porch of the main house, a small, solid woman in a dark dress and white apron, arms crossed, watching. "That's Mrs. Chen," Elias said quietly. Don't let the stern look fool you. She's got a soft center, just takes time to find it. How much time? Clara asked. Been 2 years. I'll let you know when I get there. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. The wagon pulled into the yard. Chickens scattered complaining. A dog emerged from the barn, some kind of cattle-dog mix, and trotted over to investigate, tail wagging cautiously. Mrs. Chen descended the porch steps. She was older than Clara had expected, maybe 60, with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. Chinese, which explained the name. Clara had seen Chinese workers in Philadelphia, but never spoken to one. Mr. Hart, Mrs. Chen said. Her English was perfect, barely accented. You bring home another one. This is Miss Clara Whitfield, Elias said, swinging down from the wagon. 2-week trial as governess. Mrs. Chen's gaze swept over Clara, the wedding dress, the travel-worn face, the bare hands clutching a reticule. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not pity. Recognition, maybe. You run from something or toward something? Mrs. Chen asked bluntly. Clara met her gaze. Both. Mrs. Chen's mouth twitched. Honest answer. Come, I show you the bunkhouse. Girls help with trunk. Yes, Mrs. Chen, the twins chorused, scrambling out of the wagon. Clara accepted Elias's hand down from the bench. Her legs felt shaky, 2 days of train travel, and emotional wreckage catching up with her all at once. Mrs. Chen will get you settled, Elias said. Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy. You can meet everyone then. He paused. And Miss Whitfield, welcome to Hart's Run. He walked toward the barn, the dog trailing behind him. Mrs. Chen gestured toward a small building attached to the main house by a covered walkway. This way. Watch for chickens, they think they own everything. Clara followed her white silk dress, completely absurd in this working ranch yard. The twins dragged her trunk between them, arguing about the proper technique. The bunkhouse was small, one room maybe 12 feet square, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk for storage, and a single window facing east. Clean, sparse, private. Door has good lock, Mrs. Chen said, demonstrating. Key is yours. No one enters without permission. Mr. Hart is strict about this. She set a folded towel and a bar of soap on the washstand. Basin water from the pump in the yard. Hot water for baths, you ask me. Understand? Yes, thank you. Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. That dress, you want to keep it? Clara looked down at the white silk, wrinkled, stained, beautiful, and ruined all at once. No, she said quietly. I don't think I do. Mrs. Chen nodded. I have work dress that might fit. I bring after dinner. Now you rest. Dinner at 6. Don't be late. Mr. Hart doesn't like waste. She left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Clara stood in the center of the small room, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. Chickens clucking. The twins' laughter. A horse whinnying somewhere. The creak of the windmill turning. She walked to the window and looked out at the valley. The sun was almost gone now, just a rim of gold on the mountains. The creek caught the last light and threw it back like a promise. The main house glowed warm with lamplight. Clara pulled the telegram from her pocket one last time. Wedding canceled. Do not come. James. She read it once more, then tore it in half, then in half again, and again until it was confetti in her palms. She opened the window and let the wind take the pieces. They scattered across the yard like snow white against the darkening ground. The chickens investigated briefly, then lost interest. Clara watched until every piece was gone. Then she closed the window, sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and let herself cry quietly briefly with the door locked and her boots still on. When she was done, she washed her face in the cold water from the basin, smoothed her ruined dress one last time, and went to find dinner. Because survival wasn't pretty or dignified, it was just showing up. and Clara Whitfield was very, very good at showing up. Outside, unnoticed in the gathering dark, a rider sat his horse on the ridge overlooking Hart's Run. He'd been there for 20 minutes watching the wagon arrive, watching the woman in white step down, watching the lamps come on in the windows. Gideon Rourke touched the brim of his hat and smiled. Then he turned his horse and rode back toward town, already planning. Hart's water rights were almost in his grasp. And this new complication, this abandoned bride in a wedding dress, she might just be the leverage he needed. The first lesson started with flour. Clara stood in the Hart kitchen at 7 the next morning, her borrowed work dress a simple brown calico that Mrs. Chen had delivered the night before, smelling faintly of lye soap and someone else's life. June and Josie sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, faces set in identical expressions of mulish resistance. "I ain't learning nothing," June announced. "Isn't learning anything," Clara corrected automatically, then caught herself. "Actually, you're about to learn the alphabet, starting now." "Why?" Josie demanded. "Because your father hired me to teach you." "Papa hired lots of teachers. They all left." Clara met those defiant brown eyes and saw the challenge there, the test every new adult had to pass or fail. She'd seen it before in the mill when new girls arrived and the veterans wanted to know if they'd break or bend. "They left," Clara said evenly, "because they tried to make you into something you're not. I'm not going to do that." "What are you going to do then?" Clara reached for the flour tin on the counter. "Watch." She dumped a handful of flour onto the clean table surface and smoothed it with her palm until it formed a thin white canvas. Then she drew a letter A with her finger, simple, clear, unmistakable. "This is A. It starts words like apple and angry and adventure." She looked at June. "You wanted adventure yesterday. This is where it starts, with letters." June leaned forward despite herself. "That's it. Just a letter. Just a letter. Which becomes a word, which becomes a story, which becomes anything you want it to be." Clara drew a B beside the A. "Your turn. Copy these." For a moment, neither girl moved. Then Josie reached out and traced the A with one finger, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. June followed competitive instinct overriding stubbornness. "Good," Clara said. "Now B." "What's B start?" June asked. "Brave, bold, beautiful." "Can it start bad?" Josie asked hopefully. "It can start anything you want. That's the whole point." Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, carrying a basket of eggs. She stopped, watched the girls bent over the floured table, and something that might have been approval flickered across her face. Then she set the eggs on the counter and disappeared without a word. By the time Elias came in from morning chores an hour later, the entire alphabet was spread across the table in flour, and both girls were arguing over who could write dog better. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, staring. "Morning," Clara said, brushing flour from her borrowed dress. "We're working on nouns." "I can see that." His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes held something else. Surprise, maybe, or hope. "How'd you get them to sit still?" "I didn't. I gave them something worth sitting still for." June looked up. "Papa, did you know that letters can make any word you want, even bad ones?" "I did know that, yes." "Miss Whitfield says we have to learn multiplication before she tells us scary stories." Josie added clearly, considering this a betrayal of the highest order. Elias's mouth twitched. "Sounds fair to me." He looked at Clara. "When you're done here, I'd like to show you the property, so you know where the girls can go and where they can't." "Of course." "Finish your letters, girls, then help Mrs. Chen with the chickens." "Yes, Papa," they chorused without enthusiasm. Elias left. Clara heard his boots on the porch, the creak of the step, the sound of him calling to someone about a fence that needed mending. "Miss Whitfield." June's voice was small suddenly, uncertain. "Yes." Are you gonna leave like the others? Clara looked at her, at this fierce, wild child who'd already learned that adults were temporary, that promises broke, that nothing lasted. I don't know, Clara said honestly. But I'm here now. And while I'm here, I'm going to teach you everything I can. Deal. June considered this, then nodded. Deal. They spent another hour on letters, then numbers, then a brief geography lesson, using eggs to demonstrate the difference between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. By the time Clara released them to chicken duty, both girls were arguing about which ocean was bigger and whether you could swim across either one. Clara stood at the kitchen window watching them chase hens across the yard and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not quite contentment, but close. You did good. She turned. Mrs. Chen was kneading bread dough at the counter, her strong hands working the mass with practiced efficiency. They're smart, Clara said. Just bored. Smart children are always bored. Stupid adults try to fix this by making them sit still and be quiet. Mrs. Chen punched the dough hard. You are not stupid adult. Thank you, I think. Is compliment. Don't waste it. Mrs. Chen shaped the dough into a loaf and set it in a pan. Mr. Hart is outside. He waits for you. Clara found him near the barn, checking the shoes on one of the horses, a big sorrel gelding with a white blaze and the patience of a saint. He looked up when her shadow fell across the ground. Ready for the tour? Ready. They walked the property for the next hour. Elias showed her the boundaries, the creek that ran along the southern edge, the fence line that marked where Heartland ended and public grazing began, the line shack 2 miles north, where ranch hands stayed during calving season. Creek's the most important thing here, Elias said, as they stood on the bank watching the water run clear and cold over smooth stones. It feeds the whole valley, comes down from the mountains, never runs dry. Other ranches depend on wells that go brackish in summer. We've got reliable water year-round. That must make you popular. Something dark crossed his face. Popular's not the word I'd use. There's a man in town, Gideon Rourke, who's been buying up water rights wherever he can. Wants to control who gets access and who doesn't. Charges fees for water that used to flow free. Can he do that? If enough people sell to him, yes. He's offered to buy my rights 3 times now. Gets a little more insistent each time. Clara heard the worry beneath the words. What happens if you don't sell? I don't know yet. Elias picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. 3 skips, then gone. But I'm not selling. This land's been Heartland for 15 years. My father built the house. My wife... He stopped. Started again. Sarah loved this creek. Used to bring the girls down here when they were babies, let them splash in the shallows. I'm not giving that to Rourke, so he can charge me for water that's rightfully mine. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the creek flow. The girls mentioned their mother, Clara said carefully. If that's difficult to talk about. It's been 2 years. Should be easier by now. Elias's voice was flat. Doc says it was her heart. Just stopped one night while she was sleeping. She was 26 years old and her heart just stopped. He threw another stone harder this time. It sank without skipping. Girls were 3. They don't remember much. I'm glad for that, I think. Easier not to remember than to remember, and lose it slowly. Clara thought about her own mother, 10 years gone to fever, her face already fuzzy in memory, except for specific moments preserved like daggerflies in amber. The smell of her hair, the sound of her laugh, the way she'd hum while cooking. I remember my mother's hands, Clara said. Not her face really, just her hands. She had long fingers. Piano fingers, my father used to say, even though we never had a piano. Elias looked at her. How old were you? 14. Old enough to remember. Young enough that it still felt like the world ending. Does it get easier? No, you just get stronger at carrying it. He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. Come on. Want to show you something else." They walked upstream, following the creek toward the mountains. The morning was warming up, the sun burning off the last of the dew. Birds called from the cottonwoods. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. "There," Elias said, pointing to a stand of trees where the creek widened into a small pool. "That's where I told the girls they could play. Deep enough to wade, shallow enough they can't drown. Mrs. Chen watches from the house. You can see it from the kitchen window." "Where can't they go?" "North pasture, where we keep the bull. Too dangerous. And they're not allowed near the property line without an adult. Rourke's men have been riding the boundaries lately. Haven't caused trouble yet, but I don't trust it." Clara filed that away. "Anything else I should know?" "Town's 8 miles south. We go in once a week for supplies church if the weather's good. School board's been after me to send the girls to the town school, but—" He stopped. "But town school marm's a friend of Mrs. Hendricks, woman who said my girls looked like wild Indians." His voice was carefully controlled. "I'm not sending them there to be shamed for not fitting someone else's idea of civilized." "Good," Clara said firmly. "They're perfect as they are." Elias looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You really think so?" "I know so. They're smart, curious, brave. Give me 3 months, and they'll be reading better than half the adults in town." 3 months. He raised an eyebrow. Thought this was a 2-week trial. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I meant hypothetically. If it works out." "Right. Hypothetically." But he was almost smiling. They walked back toward the house in comfortable silence. As they approached, Clara saw a horse tied to the porch rail, a flashy bay gelding with expensive tack and a proud arch to its neck. A stranger's horse. Elias's face went hard. "Damn!" "What?" "That's Rourke's horse." He lengthened his stride. "Stay here." "Like hell." Clara kept pace with him. "If this concerns the ranch, it concerns the girls. Which means it concerns me." He glanced at her, started to argue, then thought better of it. "Fine. But let me do the talking." They rounded the corner of the house and found Mrs. Chen standing on the porch, arms crossed, blocking the doorway like a very small, very determined fortress. In the yard, June and Josie huddled by the chicken coop, watching with wide eyes. And facing Mrs. Chen, hat in hand, and smile like oil on water, stood the handsomest man Clara had ever seen. He was tall, taller than Elias by a few inches, with golden hair, blue eyes, and the kind of face that belonged on magazine illustrations. His clothes were expensive, but practical leather vest, pressed shirt, trousers, tucked into polished boots. He looked like he'd stepped out of a painting titled "The Ideal Western Gentleman." Clara disliked him instantly. "Mr. Hart," the man said, turning that magazine smile on Elias. "Good to see you." "Rourke." Elias's voice could have frozen the creek. "What brings you out here?" "Just being neighborly, checking on the valley's most stubborn rancher." Rourke's eyes flicked to Clara, and his smile widened. "And who's this lovely lady, new housekeeper?" "Governess," Elias said flatly. "Miss Clara Whitfield, this is Gideon Rourke. He owns the land office in town and most of the water rights in the valley." "Not all of them yet," Rourke said cheerfully, "but I'm working on it." He tipped his hat to Clara. "Miss Whitfield, pleasure to meet you. You're a long way from— where did you come from?" "Philadelphia," Clara said before she could stop herself. "Philadelphia. My. That's quite a journey. What brings a Philadelphia lady all the way to Laramie?" Clara felt Elias tense beside her. She lifted her chin. "A new beginning, Mr. Rourke. I hear Wyoming territory is full of them." "Indeed it is. Indeed it is." Rourke's eyes were bright with curiosity, the kind of curiosity that would turn into gossip by sunset. "Well, welcome to the valley, Miss Whitfield. I do hope you'll find our little community welcoming." "I'm sure I will." "Mr. Rourke," Elias said, ice in every syllable. If you've got business, state it. Otherwise, I've got work to do. Rourke's smile never wavered. Always so direct, Hart. That's what I admire about you. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. Actually, I came to make you a new offer. My previous proposals were, let's say, conservative. This one's much more generous. Not interested. You haven't heard the terms yet. Don't need to. Answer's the same as the last 3 times, no. Rourke's smile tightened just slightly. Hart, be reasonable. I'm offering you twice what this land is worth. You could buy property anywhere, start over with money in your pocket, and no worries about water rights or grazing fees or crooked land speculators trying to squeeze every rancher in the valley for basic necessities. Elias's voice was dangerously quiet. That what you were going to say. I prefer to call it smart business. I call it theft dressed up in legal papers. The smile was completely gone now. Rourke's face hardened into something that matched his eyes' cold, calculating mien. You're making a mistake, Hart. That's my mistake to make. Is it? What about those girls of yours? Rourke gestured toward June and Josie, who pressed closer together by the chicken coop. Growing up without a mother's hard enough. Growing up on a failed ranch because their father was too stubborn to take a good offer. That's just cruel. Elias moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing still. The next he had Rourke by the shirt front, pulled up close enough that Clara could see Rourke's eyes widen in genuine alarm. You threaten my girls again, Elias said softly, and I will break every bone in your hand. You mention my wife again, and I'll break every bone in your face. You understand me, Gideon? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Rourke raised both hands slowly. Understood. My apologies. That was out of line. Elias released him and stepped back. Get off my property. Rourke smoothed his shirt, collected his hat from where it had fallen, and walked to his horse with as much dignity as he could muster. He swung into the saddle and looked down at Elias with an expression that made Clara's skin crawl. You know, Hart, I've been patient. I've been polite. I've offered you fair prices. But patience runs out. He gathered the reins. When this valley goes dry next summer, and it will, because I control where the water goes, now you'll come begging, and I'll remember this conversation. Get off my land. Rourke touched his hat brim to Clara. Miss Whitfield, do enjoy your stay at Hart's Run, however long it lasts. He rode out at a canter dust rising behind him. Nobody spoke until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then Elias turned to Mrs. Chen. He threaten you. He try. I tell him I have cleaver and know how to use it. Mrs. Chen's face was grim. He laugh. He won't laugh if he come back. Girls, you all right? June and Josie nodded, but Clara could see they were shaken. She walked over and knelt beside them. You know what I learned about bullies when I worked in the mill? She asked. What? Josie whispered. They're always scared. That's why they threaten people. Because deep down they know they're weak, so they try to make everyone else feel weaker. Clara squeezed both girls' hands. Your papa's not weak, and neither are you. Remember that. Is Mr. Rourke gonna hurt us? June asked. No, Elias said, firmly joining them. He's gonna try to hurt me, but he won't touch you, either of you, ever. That's a promise. Okay, Papa. Now go help Mrs. Chen with lunch. Miss Whitfield and I need to talk. The girls scurried inside. Mrs. Chen followed, but not before giving Clara a long, appraising look that seemed to say, maybe you're not so temporary after all. When they were alone, Elias rubbed his face with both hands. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't be. I'm glad I did. Clara crossed her arms. How long has he been pressuring you? 6 months. Started polite, got progressively less so. Today's the first time he's threatened the girls directly, though. Will he actually make good on it? About the water. I don't know. He owns rights to 3 other creeks that feed the valley. If he diverts them or charges fees high enough that smaller ranchers can't pay, this whole area could dry up by midsummer. Elias looked toward the creek, worry etched in every line of his face. I've been talking to other ranchers about forming a water association, sharing resources, presenting a united front. But most are scared of Rourke. He's got money connections and the sheriff in his pocket. Clara thought about the way Rourke had looked at the girls, the calculation in those blue eyes. He'll be back. I know. What are you going to do? Elias met her gaze. I'm going to protect what's mine. Creekland girls. Whatever it takes. Good, Clara said. Then I'll help. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but those girls need stability, and they won't have it if this ranch fails, or if their father's fighting battles alone. She lifted her chin. You gave me a place when I had nowhere to go. Let me return the favor. Something shifted in Elias's expression, surprise, gratitude, and something else Clara couldn't quite name. 2 weeks, he said slowly. You've been here less than a day. 2 weeks, 2 hours, doesn't matter. This is right. Clara surprised herself with how much she meant it. Besides, I'm a damn good teacher. Those girls are going to be reading by Christmas. And when Rourke or anyone else tries to say they're not civilized enough for town school, they'll be so educated they'll make the town schoolmarm look like a fool. Elias laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. You're something, Miss Whitfield. Clara, if we're going to work together, you might as well use my first name. Clara, then. He offered his hand. Thank you. She shook it. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. You're welcome, Elias. They walked back to the house together. Mrs. Chen was already setting out lunch: cold chicken bread, fresh butter, and a jar of peach preserves that must have been saved from last summer. The girls were washing their hands at the pump, arguing about whose turn it was to feed the chickens after the meal. Normal. Domestic. Like this was a family instead of a collection of broken pieces trying to fit together. Clara sat at the table across from Elias, flanked by June and Josie, and thought, I could belong here. Maybe. If I'm careful. If I don't let myself want it too much. But she already wanted it. That was the problem. After lunch, Clara returned to lessons. This time they moved outside addition and subtraction taught by counting eggs, geography taught by drawing maps in the dirt, history taught through stories of Clara's journey west. The girls soaked it up like dry ground after rain. By late afternoon, both were yawning. Clara sent them to rest while she helped Mrs. Chen prepare dinner: venison stew that had been simmering all day, biscuits, canned green beans from last year's garden. You are good with children, Mrs. Chen said, not looking up from the biscuit dough she was cutting. Thank you. You have children before? No. No husband, no children. Mrs. Chen's knife paused for just a moment. The dress. It wasn't a question. Clara nodded. He was fool, Mrs. Chen said flatly. His loss. Clara felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. Is truth. Mrs. Chen slid the biscuits into the oven. Mr. Hart is good man. He hurt but good. You stay, you help girls, you help him. Is good for everyone. I'm only here for 2 weeks. Mrs. Chen snorted. We see. Dinner was quiet, the comfortable quiet of people too tired to talk much, but content to be together. June and Josie told their father about the ocean lesson with the eggs. Elias told them about fixing the fence in the north pasture. Mrs. Chen didn't tell anyone anything, but her presence anchored the meal somehow. After dinner, Clara took the girls outside to watch the sunset while Elias and Mrs. Chen cleaned up. They sat on the porch steps, one twin on each side of her, watching the sky turn from blue to pink to deep purple. Miss Whitfield, June said quietly, Today was a good day. It was. Even with Mr. Rourke. Especially with Mr. Rourke. You know why? Why? Because your papa stood up for what's right, and you both saw what that looks like. Josie leaned her head against Clara's shoulder. "Are you really gonna stay?" Clara thought about Philadelphia, about James, about the life she'd planned that had vanished like smoke. Then she thought about flower letters and Creek lessons and a widowed rancher with storm cloud eyes who'd offered structure instead of pity. "I'm here now," she said. "That's what matters." It wasn't an answer, but it was enough. Later, alone in her small bunkhouse with the door locked and the lamp burning low, Clara unpacked her trunk properly for the first time. Most of her things were practical work dresses, undergarments, a second pair of boots. But at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was the white silk wedding dress. She lifted it out and held it up to the lamplight. It was still beautiful, despite the travel stains. Still full of all the hopes she'd stitched into every seam. Clara folded it carefully, placed it back in the trunk, and closed the lid. Then she blew out the lamp and lay in the narrow bed listening to the ranch settle into night. Horses shifting in the barn. An owl calling from the cottonwoods. The creek running quiet and steady in the darkness. Tomorrow she'd start a proper curriculum. She'd teach the girls to write full sentences, do double-digit addition, identify every state on a map. She'd prove to Elias and to herself that she was worth keeping. But tonight, she let herself rest. And for the first time since stepping off that train, Clara slept without nightmares. 3 weeks became 4. 4 became 6. The 2-week trial nobody mentioned anymore hung in the air like morning fog present, but ignored because naming it might make it real. Clara stopped counting days and started counting progress instead. June could write her full name without reversing any letters. Josie had memorized the multiplication tables up to 6. Both girls could read simple sentences and locate Wyoming territory on the hand-drawn map that now hung in the kitchen beside Mrs. Chen's collection of cooking spoons. The ranch settled into rhythm. Morning lessons in the kitchen. Afternoon chores with the girls trailing after their father, learning how to check fence lines and read weather signs and tell good grazing from bad. Evenings on the porch with Clara reading aloud from the battered copy of Gulliver's Travels that Elias had produced from somewhere, his voice mixing with hers as the twins demanded their father do all the giant voices. Nobody mentioned the 2-week trial. Nobody mentioned that Clara had moved half her trunk into the main house because Mrs. Chen insisted it was foolish to keep winter clothes in an unheated bunkhouse. Nobody mentioned that Elias had started asking Clara's opinion on ranch decisions, whether to sell 3 heifers now or wait for spring prices. Whether the new hand he was considering hiring seemed trustworthy, whether the girls were old enough to learn to ride alone. And nobody mentioned that Clara had stopped thinking about Philadelphia entirely, except in dreams where James still showed up sometimes wearing Gideon Rourke's face and asking why she'd thought she deserved better. October gave way to November. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning while Clara was teaching fractions using dried beans. The girls abandoned their lesson to press their faces against the window breath, fogging the glass. "Can we go play in it?" June begged. "After you finish the problem," Clara said. "Come on. If you have 12 beans and you divide them into 3 equal groups, how many beans are in each group?" 4, Josie said without looking away from the window. "Can we go now?" "Show your work first." Josie sighed dramatically, returned to the table, and arranged the beans into 3 groups of 4, with the efficiency of someone who just wanted to be done. "There. Work shown. Snow, please." Clara laughed. "Go. But stay where I can see you from the window." They exploded out the door like buckshot. Within minutes, they were rolling in the thin dusting of snow, trying to build a snowman from insufficient materials and succeeding only in getting themselves soaked and giggling. "You're too easy on them." Clara turned. Elias stood in the kitchen doorway shaking snow from his hat. His cheeks were red from cold, and his eyes were warm, and something in Clara's chest did a complicated flip that she absolutely did not want to examine. "They finished their work," she said. "They earned the break. Still, Sarah used to—" He stopped, started again. "The previous governesses were stricter. The previous governesses failed. I'm not failing." Clara kept her voice light, but she meant every word. Those girls are learning because they want to, not because they're forced to. That's worth more than any amount of strictness. Elias studied her for a long moment. You really believe that? I know that. I worked in a mill, remember? I've seen what happens when people are forced instead of taught. They break or they run. Your daughters are too smart for either. He smiled a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look years younger. You're good for them, Clara. She felt heat rise in her face and turned back to the window to hide it. They're good students. Makes my job easy. That's not what I meant. Before Clara could figure out how to respond to that, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted, multiple horses moving fast. Elias's smile vanished. He crossed to the window in 3 strides. Get the girls inside, now! Clara didn't question. She ran outside. June, Josie, inside right now. The twins heard the urgency in her voice and came immediately snow-dusted and confused. Clara herded them through the door and closed it firmly behind them. What's wrong? June asked. I don't know yet. Stay here with Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen had already appeared from the pantry cleaver in hand. She positioned herself between the girls and the door without a word. Clara moved to the window beside Elias. 4 riders were approaching the ranch at a hard gallop. As they got closer, Clara recognized the lead horse Rourke's flashy bay gelding. Damn, Elias breathed. He brought men this time. Who are they? The big one on the left is Bull Garrett, Rourke's foreman. The others are hired muscle from town. Men who'll do anything for money and don't ask questions. Elias's hand moved to his hip, where Clara suddenly realized he wore a gun belt she'd never seen before. Clara, take the girls to your bunkhouse. Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice. Elias, please. He looked at her, and the fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. I need to know they're safe. I need to know you're safe. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stay and face whatever was coming. But one look at June and Josie's frightened faces made the decision for her. Come on, girls, quick and quiet. They slipped out the back door and ran for the bunkhouse. Clara locked them inside, pulled the curtain closed, and gathered both girls close. What's happening? Josie whispered. I don't know, but your papa will handle it. What if he can't? Clara made her voice firm. He can. Now hush. Through the thin walls, she heard horses stop in the yard, heard Rourke's smooth voice calling out, heard Elias respond, his words too low to make out, but his tone hard as stone. You've had 6 months to reconsider, Hart. Rourke's voice carried clear as church bells. I'm done being patient. Then stop being patient and get off my land. See, that's the problem. Your stubborn pride is hurting this whole valley. Other ranchers are ready to sell. They see the wisdom in my water association plan. You're the only holdout. Because your plan is theft. It's called progress, Hart, civilization, something you seem determined to resist. A pause. Or maybe you're just determined to fail. Maybe you want your ranch to go under. Maybe you've got a death wish since Sarah. The gunshot made Clara and the girls jump. Papa? June tried to bolt for the door. Clara grabbed her. Stay here. He told us to stay here. Another shot. Then another. Not the sharp crack of pistols, but the deeper boom of rifles. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She held the girls tight, feeling them shake, and prayed harder than she'd prayed since her mother died. The shooting stopped. Silence fell like a stone. Then Elias's voice loud and clear. Next man who draws gets shot for real. Rourke, you've got 10 seconds to get back on that horse. You just fired at a county land officer, Hart. That's a crime. I fired over your head. If I'd aimed at you, you'd be dead. There's the difference. Elias's voice was colder than Clara had ever heard it. Now get off my land. More silence. Then hoofbeats. Fast and angry, heading away. Clara waited, counting heartbeats. 50. 100. 200. A knock on the bunkhouse door. "Clara, it's me." She unlocked it with shaking hands. Elias stood there, rifle in one hand, face pale but set. Behind him, Mrs. Chen was already heading back to the main house, cleaver still gripped tight. "Is everyone all right?" His eyes scanned all three of them, checking for injuries. "We're fine. Are you?" Yeah, I'm fine." He crouched down to the girl's level. "Hey, you two okay?" June threw her arms around his neck. "You shot at them, Papa." "Over them. Important difference. Nobody got hurt." "Are they coming back?" Josie's voice was small. Elias's jaw tightened. "I don't know, sweetheart. But if they do, Papa will handle it. I promise." He stood still, holding June. Josie grabbed his free hand. Clara followed them back to the main house, her legs unsteady. Inside, Mrs. Chen was already at the stove making tea with the grim efficiency of someone who'd dealt with worse. She poured 4 cups without asking, added honey to the girls' portions, and set them on the table. "Drink," she commanded. They drank. The hot, sweet tea helped. Color returned to everyone's faces. The twins stopped shaking. Elias set down his rifle and scrubbed both hands over his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry you all had to—" "Don't," Clara interrupted. "Don't apologize for protecting your home." "Clara's right," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You did what you had to do. Now question is what you do next." "What I do next is ride into town and talk to the marshal. Report what happened. Make sure Rourke cannot twist this into me being the aggressor." "The sheriff's in Rourke's pocket," Clara pointed out. "Will the marshal listen?" "Don't know, but I have to try." Elias looked at Clara. "Can you stay with the girls? Keep them inside until I get back." "Of course." "I'll probably be gone most of the day. Maybe overnight if—" "We'll be fine. Mrs. Chen and I will manage." He nodded, looking like he wanted to say something else, but couldn't find the words. Instead, he kissed both girls on the forehead, grabbed his coat, and headed for the barn. Clara watched him ride out 10 minutes later, sitting straight in the saddle, despite the tension she could see in every line of his body. The rifle was strapped to his saddle within easy reach. "Miss Whitfield." June's voice was quiet. "Is Papa in trouble?" Clara chose her words carefully. "Your Papa stood up for what's right. Sometimes that makes trouble. But it's still the right thing to do." "Will Mr. Rourke hurt him?" "No, your Papa's too smart for that." She hoped she was telling the truth. The day crawled by. Clara tried to maintain normal routine lessons, lunch, afternoon chores, but her attention kept drifting to the empty yard, the road that stayed stubbornly absent of riders. The girls were subdued, their usual energy dampened by worry. By dinner time, Elias still wasn't back. Mrs. Chen set 4 places at the table anyway, and they ate in near silence. After the meal, Clara sent the twins to bed early and sat on the porch with Mrs. Chen, both of them watching the road. "He'll be all right," Mrs. Chen said. "Mr. Hart is strong, smart. He knows when to fight and when to walk away." "Does he?" Clara thought about the gunshots, the cold fury in Elias's voice. "Because from where I'm sitting, he looks like a man who's done walking away." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then, "After Miss Sarah died, he almost lost this place. Grief made him not careful, made bad decisions, couldn't focus. Doc Morrison's wife she helped, sent her daughter to watch the babies, sent her sons to help with cattle, sent food when Mr. Hart forgot to eat." She rocked slowly. Whole Valley helped him through that first year. Now Rourke wants to take what those people saved. Mr. Hart won't let that happen. Can't let it happen. Even if it costs him everything. Especially then. Clara pulled her shawl tighter against the November cold. "He's going to need help. More help than one governess and one housekeeper can provide. Then we get him help. Tomorrow I go to town. Talk to Doc Morrison. Talk to people who remember how Valley helped Mr. Hart. Remind them that Rourke is everyone's problem, not just his. Will they listen? Mrs. Chen's smile was sharp as her cleaver. They will listen, or they will answer to me. Clara believed her. They stayed on the porch until full dark, until the cold drove them inside. Clara checked on the girls, both asleep, curled together in June's bed like puppies, then retreated to her bunkhouse. She lay in bed listening for hoofbeats and tried not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. She must have dozed because sudden pounding on her door jerked her awake. Moonlight streamed through the window. The pounding came again. "Clara, Clara, open up!" Elias's voice, but wrong somehow. Ragged. She fumbled with the lock and flung the door open. Elias stood there swaying. Blood soaked his left sleeve and dripped from his fingers onto the wooden step. "Jesus," Clara breathed. "What happened?" "Ambush. Rode back from town. 3 men. He leaned against the doorframe. "Got away. But one of them got me." Clara grabbed his good arm and pulled him inside. "Sit. Now." He collapsed onto the room's single chair. Clara lit the lamp with shaking hands, then knelt beside him to examine the wound. The bullet had torn through the meat of his upper arm, painful and bloody, but not deadly. Not if she could stop the bleeding. "I need clean cloth. Water. Whiskey if you've got it." "Mrs. Chen. She'll have—" "I'm not waking Mrs. Chen or the girls at this hour. They're scared enough already." Clara tore a strip from her petticoat. "This'll have to do for now." She wrapped his arm tight, trying not to think about how much blood there was, how close the bullet had come to the artery. Elias hissed in pain, but didn't pull away. "Did you see who it was?" Clara asked. "Too dark, but Garrett's voice. I'd know it anywhere." Elias's face was gray. "They were waiting. Knew what time I'd be coming back." "Did you make it to the marshal?" "Yeah, he listened. Took my statement. Said he'd look into it." Elias laughed bitterly. "Lot of good that did. Rourke probably paid someone to tell his men when I was leaving." Clara tied off the makeshift bandage. "You need a doctor. Can't risk going back to town tonight. They might be watching the road." "Then I'll go get Doc Morrison in the morning." "Clara. Don't argue with me. You've been shot. You need proper medical attention. End of discussion." She stood and fetched her water pitcher. "Drink this. All of it." He obeyed, which told Clara exactly how much pain he was in. When he finished, she guided him to the narrow bed. "I can't take your bed." "You can and will. I'll sleep in the chair." "Clara. Elias Hart. You have been shot. You are going to lie down in that bed and rest, or I swear I will get Mrs. Chen's cleaver and make you." She softened her voice. "Please, let me help you." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and lowered himself onto the bed with a groan. Clara pulled the blanket over him and settled into the chair prepared for a long night. "Thank you," Elias said quietly. "For everything, for staying, for helping with the girls, for not running when— Hush, save your strength." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why did you stay? After the 2 weeks?" Clara considered lying. Considered saying something practical about the job or the money or the girls. But here in the lamplight with this man bleeding on her bed because he'd refused to surrender to a bully, the truth felt necessary. "Because I needed to know I could," she said simply. "After James canceled the wedding, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't worth keeping. Maybe there was something wrong with me that made people leave." She met Elias's eyes. "But then I came here, and you gave me work without judgment. The girls gave me purpose without conditions. Mrs. Chen gave me respect without earning it first. And I realized James was wrong. It wasn't that I wasn't worth keeping. It was that he wasn't worth staying for." Elias was quiet for so long, Clara thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he said, "He's a fool, Clara, and a coward. I know that now." "Good." His eyes were starting to close. You're worth more than—" He drifted off mid-sentence. Clara watched his chest rise and fall steady and strong, despite the blood loss. She'd need to change his bandage in a few hours. Check for fever. Make sure the bleeding had stopped completely. But for now, she let him rest. Dawn came cold and gray. Clara had dozed off in the chair sometime around 3 and woke with a stiff neck and cramping legs. Elias was still asleep, his color better, but the bandage soaked through with red. She changed it carefully, trying not to wake him. He stirred, once mumbled something that might have been Sarah's name, then settled back into sleep. Clara slipped out to find Mrs. Chen already in the kitchen, making breakfast with the twins underfoot. "Papa's not in his room," June said immediately. "Where is he?" Clara had prepared for this. "He got home late and didn't want to wake you. He's resting now." "When can we see him?" "After breakfast. He needs to sleep a bit longer." Mrs. Chen's eyes were sharp on Clara's face, reading the truth there. "Girls, go feed chickens. Now." "But..." "Now." They went. Mrs. Chen waited until the door closed behind them, then turned to Clara. "How bad?" "Gunshot to the left arm, through and through. I bandaged it, but he needs a doctor." Mrs. Chen's face went hard as granite. "I will go. You stay with girls and Mr. Hart. Keep rifle close. If anyone comes who is not me or Doc Morrison, you shoot first." "Mrs. Chen." "Shoot. First." She grabbed her coat. "I will be back by noon. Keep doors locked." She was gone before Clara could argue. The morning stretched into afternoon. Clara kept the girls busy with lessons, but their attention kept drifting to their father's absence. Finally, just after lunch, Elias appeared in the kitchen doorway, pale but upright. "Papa." Both girls ran to him. He caught them with his good arm, wincing but smiling. "Hey, troublemakers, miss me." "Where were you?" June demanded. "Miss Whitfield said you were resting, but you weren't in your room, and..." "I was in the bunkhouse. Didn't want to track mud through the whole house last night." The lie came smooth and easy. "But I'm here now. What are you learning today?" "The states," Josie said. "Miss Whitfield is teaching us all the capitals." "Is she now?" "Well, don't let me interrupt." But he stayed leaning against the counter, watching Clara teach with an expression she couldn't quite read. When Mrs. Chen returned an hour later with Doc Morrison in tow, he let himself be led away to his room without protest. Clara kept the girls occupied in the kitchen while the doctor worked. 20 minutes later, Doc Morrison emerged, rolling down his sleeves. "He'll be fine. Wound's clean. I stitched it up proper and gave him laudanum for the pain. He'll need rest for a week or so, but he should heal well." The doctor looked at Clara. "You did good work with that bandage, miss. Probably saved him from losing a lot more blood." "Thank you." "Mrs. Chen told me what's been happening out here, with Rourke." Doc Morrison's face was grim. "That man's a cancer on this valley. Someone needs to cut him out before he kills someone." "The marshal," Clara started. "The marshal's new and doesn't know how deep Rourke's influence runs. But some of us remember when this valley took care of its own." He picked up his bag. "I'm calling a meeting. Tomorrow night at the church. Every rancher in the valley. It's time we stood together." After he left, Clara checked on Elias. He was asleep, his breathing deep and even. She stood in the doorway watching him for a long moment, this man who'd given her a second chance without asking for anything in return. She thought about the fear in his eyes when he'd told her to take the girls to safety. The cold fury in his voice when he'd faced down Rourke. The vulnerability in his question last night. "Why did you stay?" And she thought about her answer, about James, about Philadelphia, about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that train in a ruined wedding dress. That woman felt like a stranger now. Clara closed the door quietly and returned to the kitchen where June and Josie were helping Mrs. Chen roll out pie dough. Normal. Domestic. Safe. But Clara knew it wouldn't last. The storm was coming. And when it broke, they'd all have to choose stand together or fall apart. She knew which choice she'd already made. The church was packed. Clara stood near the back with Mrs. Chen watching ranchers and their families fill the pews until there was standing room only. She recognized some faces from town: the blacksmith, the general store owner Doc Morrison and his wife. Others were strangers, weathered men and women who'd carved lives out of hard land and didn't appreciate someone trying to take what they'd built. Elias sat in the front row, his left arm in a sling. June and Josie pressed against his sides. He'd argued about bringing them, but Clara had been firm. The girls needed to see their community stand together. They needed to know their father wasn't fighting alone. Doc Morrison stood at the front, waiting for the crowd to settle. When the murmuring finally died down, he spoke. "Thank you all for coming. I know it's not easy to leave your ranches unattended, especially with everything that's been happening." He paused. "And I think we all know why we're here. Gideon Rourke has been buying up water rights across this valley for 6 months. He's promised fair access, reasonable fees, shared resources. But what he's actually done is choke off water to anyone who won't sell to him at his price. And now he's moved from economic pressure to violence." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back called out, "How do we know that's true? Rourke says Hart started the shooting." Elias stood, turning to face the speaker. "I fired over his head after he and 4 armed men showed up at my ranch and threatened my children. Then 3 of his men ambushed me on the road back from town and put a bullet through my arm. Doc Morrison can confirm the wound." "I can," Doc Morrison said firmly. "And I can also confirm that I've treated 2 other ranchers in the past month for injuries they claimed were accidents, but looked an awful lot like beatings. They were both holding out against selling their water rights." More murmurs, angrier now. A woman Clara didn't recognize stood up. "What are we supposed to do? Rourke owns half the valley already. He's got money and connections. The sheriff won't move against him. What chance do we have?" "We have each other," Elias said. His voice carried clear and strong despite his injury. "Individually, we're vulnerable. Together, we're not. Doc Morrison and I have been talking about forming a water association, a cooperative, where we share resources, set fair prices, and make decisions together. No one person controls the water. Everyone has a voice." "That sounds fine in theory," a rancher in the third row said. "But Rourke's not going to just let us do that. He'll fight." "Then we fight back. Legally." A new voice spoke from the doorway. Clara turned to see a tall man in a suit holding a leather satchel. "My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm an attorney from Cheyenne. Doc Morrison asked me to come review your situation." "We can't afford fancy lawyers," someone muttered. "You don't need to. I work for the territorial government. Part of my job is making sure land and water laws are enforced fairly." Brennan walked to the front, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew his worth. "I've reviewed the documents Mr. Rourke has filed. Most of his water rights purchases are legal, unfortunately, but several involve coercion or fraud. And his recent actions, the threats, the violence, those are criminal. They void his legal standing." "What does that mean in plain English?" the blacksmith asked. "It means if we can prove Rourke used threats or violence to obtain water rights, those sales can be nullified. The land returns to the original owners. And if we can prove a pattern of intimidation, we can have his existing rights reviewed by a territorial judge." Hope flickered through the room like a candle lighting in darkness. "But," Brennan continued, "we need evidence. Testimony from people willing to stand up in court and tell the truth about what Rourke's done. And we need protection while we build the case, because Rourke's not going to sit by quietly." "What kind of protection?" Elias asked. "The territorial marshal is already investigating based on your complaint. I've requested additional federal support. It'll take time, but help is coming." Brennan opened his satchel and pulled out papers. "In the meantime, those of you willing to join a water cooperative, I need your signatures. We'll file with the territorial government tomorrow. Once it's official, Rourke can't claim individual water rights, supersede community resources." Silence fell. Clara could feel the fear in the room. These were people who'd learned to keep their heads down, who knew that standing up meant risking everything. Then Elias walked forward. "Where do I sign?" Doc Morrison joined him. And me. The blacksmith stood. Hell, I'm in. One by one they came forward. Not everyone. Clara counted at least a dozen people who stayed in their seats, faces closed and frightened. But more than half the room moved to sign Brennan's papers. Clara felt Mrs. Chen's hand grip her arm. Is good, the old woman whispered. Is very good. The meeting lasted another hour. Brennan explained the legal process, answered questions, assured people that there was precedent for this kind of community action. Doc Morrison organized a rotation schedule, so no ranch would be left unguarded while families were in town or at church. They discussed signals gunshots in specific patterns that meant danger that would bring neighbors running. Through it all, Elias stood at the front, his injured arm forgotten, his face alight with something Clara recognized. Hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that came from having no other choice, but the solid kind built on community and shared purpose. When the meeting finally ended, people lingered talking in tight groups. Clara watched Rourke's influence crack under the weight of collective courage, and something fierce and proud swelled in her chest. Miss Whitfield. She turned to find a woman about her age holding the hand of a boy who couldn't have been more than 3. Yes. I'm Mary Morrison, Doc's daughter. My father said you've been teaching the Hart girls. I have. Would you, Mary hesitated, would you consider teaching more children? Several of us have been talking about starting a proper school out here away from town. Somewhere our kids can learn without being told they're not civilized enough because they don't have fancy clothes, or because their mothers work the ranch alongside their fathers. Clara glanced toward June and Josie, who were showing another little girl their hand-drawn map of the United States. How many children? 8, maybe 10 to start. We could rotate hosting different ranch each week, or build a schoolhouse if the cooperative gets established. Mary's eyes were bright with the same hope Clara had seen in Elias. We could pay. Not much, but something. And it would be good for the children. Good for all of us. Clara thought about the mill in Philadelphia, about girls her age who'd never learned to read because their families couldn't spare them from work. About the town school marm who'd said June and Josie looked like wild Indians. About the power that came from education, from knowing you had value beyond what others assigned you. Yes, Clara said. I'd be honored. Mary's face broke into a brilliant smile. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll organize everything and let you know when we're ready to start. As Mary walked away, Clara felt a hand on her shoulder. Elias stood there, the twins flanking him. That was kind of you, he said quietly. It was necessary. These children deserve better than what the town offers. Still, thank you. His eyes held something Clara couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes. But something deeper. Something that made her heart do that complicated flip again. We should head back, she said, breaking the moment before it could become something neither of them was ready for. It's getting dark. They collected Mrs. Chen and headed out to the wagon. The November night was cold and clear, stars sharp as broken glass in the black sky. June and Josie fell asleep almost immediately, curled together in the back under a heavy blanket. That went better than I expected, Elias said as they rode. His good hand was steady on the reins, but Clara could see tension in his shoulders. People are scared of Rourke, Clara said. But they're more scared of losing everything they've built. You gave them a way to fight back. That matters. We gave them away. Wouldn't have happened without Doc Morrison, without Brennan, without you. I didn't do anything. You stayed. You made the girls' lives stable enough that I could focus on this instead of just surviving day to day. You think I could have organized any of this 6 months ago? He shook his head. I was drowning, Clara. You threw me a rope. You threw me one first, she reminded him. At the train station. Remember? I remember. His voice was soft. Woman in a wedding dress looking like the world had ended but refusing to cry about it. Thought to myself, that's someone who knows how to survive. I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was falling apart. Same thing sometimes. Surviving means falling apart in slow motion instead of all at once. Means you're still standing when the pieces finally settle. He glanced at her. You're still standing, Clara. Stronger than when you arrived, I think. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because he was right. The woman who'd stepped off that train 2 months ago, broken, ashamed, certain she was unlovable, felt like a stranger now. This Clara, the one who taught children in flower dust and helped stitch bullet wounds and signed up to educate half the valley's children, was someone new. Someone better. So are you, she said. Standing stronger, I mean. 2 months ago you were fighting alone. Now you've got a whole community behind you. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Rourke's not going to take this well. I know. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I know that too. And you're still staying. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. I'm still staying. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they reached the ranch, Elias carried Josie while Clara took June, both girls sleep-heavy and mumbling. Mrs. Chen had gone ahead to light lamps and stoke the fire. Clara tucked June into bed while Elias handled Josie. They met in the hallway afterward, nearly colliding in the narrow space. Sorry, Clara said, stepping back. Don't be. Elias didn't move. They stood there in the lamplight, close enough that Clara could see gold flecks in his gray eyes she'd never noticed before. Clara, Whatever he was going to say died when the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. Then smoke, sharp and acrid, began seeping under the back door. Fire, Elias said, already moving. Get the girls. Get them out front, now. Clara ran. She grabbed June first, shaking her awake. Up, now. We have to go. What's now, June? The fear in Clara's voice cut through sleep. June was up and moving before she was fully awake. Clara grabbed Josie next, practically carrying her down the hall. Elias was already at the back door, rifle in hand, despite his injured arm. Someone threw a torch through the kitchen window, caught the curtains. Mrs. Chen's trying to contain it, but we need water. Lots of water. I'll get the girls to safety first. Go to the bunkhouse. Lock yourselves in. If you see anyone who's not me or Mrs. Chen, I know, shoot first. Clara herded the girls toward the front door. Outside, she could hear horses, men's voices, the crackle of spreading flames. They made it to the bunkhouse. Clara locked the door, pushed the girls under the bed, and grabbed the rifle Elias had given her weeks ago, back when she'd insisted on learning to shoot just in case. Her hands shook, but her aim was steady when she positioned herself at the window. 3 men on horseback circled the main house. One held a torch. Clara recognized Bull Garrett's massive frame on the largest horse. Hart! Garrett's voice boomed across the yard. You got one chance to reconsider Rourke's offer. Sell, or we burn everything to the ground. No answer from the house. Clara could see flames licking up the back wall, now orange and hungry in the darkness. We know you're in there, and we know you got those girls. Be a shame if something happened to them because their daddy was too stubborn to see reason. That's when Elias appeared on the front porch, rifle raised. You threaten my children again. Garrett and I will kill you where you sit. Big talk from a man whose house is burning. Garrett laughed. Face it, Hart. You lost. Rourke owns this valley. Time you accepted that. Never going to happen. Then you're gonna die here, you and your whole family. Gunfire erupted. Clara couldn't tell who shot first, but suddenly the night was full of muzzle flashes and the sharp crack of rifles. She kept her own weapon trained on the riders, waiting for a clear shot, praying she wouldn't have to take it. One of Garrett's men yelped and fell from his horse. Not dead, just winged, but enough to make the other 2 hesitate. Then more gunfire, but from a different direction. The road. Clara's heart leaped as she recognized Doc Morrison's wagon racing into the yard, the doctor himself standing up and firing a shotgun with surprising accuracy. Behind him, more wagons, more neighbors, the ranchers from the meeting arriving like cavalry. Garrett realized he was outnumbered. "This isn't over, Hart." "Yes, it is." That was the blacksmith, his voice like iron. "Marshall's been notified. Federal investigators are coming. You and Rourke are done." Garrett and his remaining men wheeled their horses and fled into the darkness. The neighbors didn't pursue, too busy helping Elias and Mrs. Chen fight the fire that was now consuming the back half of the house. Clara unlocked the bunkhouse door. "Stay here," she told the girls. "Don't come out until I get you." She ran toward the house. Men were forming a bucket brigade from the creek, passing water hand to hand, while others beat at flames with wet blankets. Clara joined the line, her arms burning with effort, her lungs choking on smoke. It took an hour to get the fire under control. By then, the entire back wall was gone. The kitchen destroyed, Mrs. Chen's neat little pantry reduced to charcoal and ash. But the rest of the house stood. The bedrooms were intact. The main structure had survived. Clara stood in the yard covered in soot and ash, watching Elias survey the damage. His face was grim, but not defeated. Never defeated. Doc Morrison approached, his own face blackened with smoke. "Marshall's riding out tonight. I sent my son to meet them on the road, tell them what happened. They'll be here by morning." "Thank you." Elias's voice was rough from smoke. "Thank you all. If you hadn't come—" "We're neighbors," the blacksmith interrupted. "That's what neighbors do. Stand together. That's the whole point of tonight's meeting, wasn't it?" Yeah, it was." Elias looked around at the assembled ranchers, at their smoke-stained faces and determined expressions. "We're going to make this work. The cooperative, the school, all of it. Rourke's not going to win." "Damn right he's not," Mary Morrison said. She'd arrived with her father, had helped fight the fire despite being 8 months pregnant. "We're done being scared." The neighbors stayed until dawn, taking turns watching the property, making sure no one returned to finish what they'd started. Mrs. Chen produced coffee and whatever food had survived from the root cellar. People ate standing up, talking in low voices, planning. Clara retrieved the girls from the bunkhouse once the danger had passed. They clung to their father, silent and scared, until he sat them down and spoke in the firm, gentle voice that was uniquely his. "Listen to me, both of you. What happened tonight was bad, scary. But we're all okay. The house can be fixed. And look around, see all these people. They came because they care about us, because we're part of a community. That's stronger than any fire, stronger than any bully. You understand?" "Yes, Papa," they whispered together. "Good. Now Miss Whitfield's going to take you to the bunkhouse to sleep, real sleep this time. And when you wake up, we're going to start fixing things." Clara settled the girls in her narrow bed. They fit barely, and sat in the chair watching them sleep. She was too wired for rest herself, her mind replaying the night's events on endless loop. A soft knock made her look up. Elias stood in the doorway, silhouetted by dawn light. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He closed the door quietly behind him and leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every one of his 30 years, and more besides. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For putting you in danger, for dragging you into this mess. You came here for a fresh start, not a war." "Stop." Clara stood and crossed to him. "You didn't drag me into anything. I chose to stay. I chose to help, and I'd choose it again." "Why?" His voice was raw. "Why would you risk yourself for us? We're not your family. This isn't your fight." Clara looked at him, at this good man who'd offered her dignity when she had nothing, who'd trusted her with his daughters when she had no credentials, who'd given her purpose when she'd lost her way. She thought about the past 2 months, about flower letters and Creek lessons, and the slow, careful way they'd built something that felt like home. "Yes, it is," she said simply. "You became my family the moment you asked me to stay. The girls became mine when they called me Miss Whitfield, like it was a title worth earning. This ranch became mine when I taught my first lesson in that kitchen. So yes, Elias, this is my fight. Because all of this," she gestured around, "is mine too now. If you'll have me." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he closed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and real and tasted like smoke and coffee and relief. Clara's arms came up around his neck without conscious thought, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed to this. His mouth on hers, his good arm around her waist, the solid reality of him against her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "Clara! God! Clara! I didn't mean I shouldn't have—" "Shut up," she said, and kissed him again. This time was slower, gentler, a promise instead of a plea. When they finally stepped back, Elias's eyes were bright. "I don't have much to offer you. A half-burned house. A fight that's not over. 2 wild daughters who'll drive you crazy. A dead wife I still—" His voice caught, "still miss sometimes." "I don't want much," Clara said. "I just want this. You. The girls. This life we're building. Damaged and messy and real. It's going to be hard." "I'm not afraid of hard. I worked in a mill, remember I know hard." She smiled. "Besides, I've already taught your daughters fractions and the state capitals. Rourke's a lightweight compared to that." He laughed a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You're something else, Clara Whitfield." "I know. You're welcome." She stepped back. "Now go get some sleep. You've been shot, you've fought a fire, and you've got marshals coming in a few hours. You need rest." "Yes, ma'am." But he didn't move immediately. Just looked at her like he was memorizing her face. "Thank you. For staying. For fighting. For—" he gestured helplessly, "everything." "You're welcome. Now go." He went. Clara watched him cross the yard in the early morning light, his shoulders squared despite exhaustion and injury. Then she returned to her chair and finally let herself cry, not from fear or sadness, but from something bigger and more complicated. Relief, joy, the overwhelming knowledge that she'd found something worth fighting for. When the tears stopped, Clara wiped her face and looked at the sleeping girls. June had her arm thrown over Josie. Both had soot smudges on their faces. Her girls now. Her responsibility. Her family. Clara Whitfield had come to Laramie in a wedding dress with nowhere to go. Now she had a home worth defending. And defend it she would. The marshals arrived 3 hours after dawn, their horses lathered from hard riding. Clara watched from the porch as 2 federal officers dismounted and surveyed the burned wreckage of the kitchen with grim expressions. Behind them rode the territorial marshal himself, a lean man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Elias met them in the yard, Mrs. Chen flanking him like a small, fierce guardian. Clara could see the exhaustion in every line of his body, but his voice was steady as he recounted the night's events. The marshals took notes, asked questions, examined the remains of the torch that had started the fire. "We've got warrants for Rourke and his men," the territorial marshal said. "Federal judge signed them this morning based on Attorney Brennan's evidence and your testimony. We're riding to Rourke's place now." "You'll need more men," Elias said. "He's got at least a dozen hired guns." "We've got more coming from Cheyenne. Should be here by noon." The marshal's face was hard. "This ends today, Hart. One way or another." They left at a gallop. Clara watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to find June and Josie pressed against the doorframe, eyes huge. "Is it over?" June whispered. "Not yet," Clara said honestly, "but soon." The day crawled by. Neighbors arrived with food tools offers of help rebuilding. The blacksmith brought lumber. Doc Morrison's sons came to clear debris. Mary Morrison appeared with 3 other women, and together they salvaged what could be saved from the ruined kitchen, while Mrs. Chen directed operations with her usual iron efficiency. Clara kept the girls occupied with lessons, but their attention kept drifting to the road, waiting for news. Finally, around mid-afternoon, she gave up on geography and took them down to the creek instead. "Tell me about your mama," Clara said, as they sat on the bank watching water flow over stones. The girls exchanged glances. Then Josie said, "We don't remember much. Just feelings mostly." "What kind of feelings?" "Safe," June said quietly. "Like nothing bad could happen when she was there." "She sang," Josie added. "Papa says she sang all the time. We don't remember the songs, but we remember the feeling of them." Clara's throat tightened. "She sounds wonderful. Papa says we look like her. Same eyes, same hair." June picked up a smooth stone, turned it over in her hands. "Do you think she'd be mad that Papa likes you?" The question landed like a physical blow. Clara took a careful breath. "What makes you think your Papa likes me?" "We're not stupid, Miss Whitfield," Josie said with the blunt honesty of childhood. "We see how he looks at you, like you're something special." "And we see how you look at him," June added, "like he's something special too." Clara should have deflected, should have changed the subject, should have done anything except tell two 5-year-old girls the truth. But she was tired of pretending, tired of being careful, tired of protecting herself from wanting things. "Your mama wouldn't be mad," Clara said, "because I'm not trying to replace her. Nobody could. She was your mother, and she'll always be your mother. But maybe there's room for someone else too. Someone who loves you and your papa and wants to be part of your family. If you'd let me." Both girls stared at her. Then June asked, "Would you be our new mama?" "I'd be Clara, your teacher, your friend, your father's—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Partner. And if someday you wanted to call me something else, something that felt right to you, that would be okay too. But only if you wanted to. No pressure, no expectations." Josie considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Could we still talk about Mama? Remember her? Of course, always, every day if you want. And you wouldn't be sad if we missed her." "I'd never be sad about that. I'd be sad if you didn't miss her. She was important. She'll always be important." June nodded slowly. "Okay then. I think Mama would like you. Papa needs someone who doesn't let him be stubborn all the time. Mama used to say that. We heard the neighbors talking about it after she died." "Your papa's stubborn because he cares about doing what's right," Clara said. "That's not a bad thing." "It is when he forgets to eat," Josie pointed out. "You make him eat. That's good." Clara laughed despite the weight of the conversation. "Well, someone has to." They sat by the creek until the sun started its descent toward the mountains, turning everything gold and amber. When they finally headed back to the house, both girls slipped their hands into Clara's without being asked. The gesture felt like trust, like permission, like family. At the house, they found organized chaos. The blacksmith and his sons had already framed out a new back wall. Mrs. Chen was directing the salvage operation with the precision of a general. And standing in the middle of it all, looking dazed but grateful, was Elias. He saw Clara and the girls, and his whole face changed, softened into something that made Clara's heart stumble. "Papa!" The twins ran to him. "Miss Whitfield took us to the creek, and we talked about Mama and about Clara being part of our family, and we think it's okay if you like her because Mama would want you to be happy." The words tumbled out in a rush. Elias's eyes went wide, then found Clara's over the girls' heads. She shrugged helplessly. "Is that so?" he managed. "Yes," June said firmly. "But only if you promise to keep eating properly. Clara says that's important." "Clara's very wise." His mouth twitched. "I'll do my best." "Good. Now we're gonna help Mrs. Chen. Come on, Josie." They scampered off, leaving Elias and Clara alone in the yard. "So," Elias said, "the girls think Mama would approve of you." "Apparently. I hope I didn't overstep. They asked and You told them the truth. That's perfect." He moved closer, mindful of the workers nearby. "Clara, about this morning, about what we don't—" She interrupted. "Don't take it back. Don't apologize. Don't tell me it was the stress or the fear or anything except what it actually was. And what was it? She met his eyes. Real. It was real. Yeah, he said softly. It was. They stood there a careful foot apart, saying everything with their eyes that they couldn't say with their mouths. Not here, not now, not with half the valley rebuilding their kitchen and watching with interest. The sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Everyone froze, hands moving toward weapons, until they recognized the territorial marshal leading a group of riders into the yard. Behind them, in handcuffs and looking murderous, were Gideon Rourke Bull Garrett and 4 other men Clara recognized from the fire. The marshal dismounted. "Mr. Hart, wanted to let you know we've made the arrests, caught them trying to leave the territory, found evidence at Rourke's place linking him to the attacks, the intimidation, the whole operation. Federal prosecutor says it's enough to put them away for a long time." Relief crashed over Clara so hard she had to lock her knees to stay upright. Around the yard, people were reacting, cheering, embracing, crying. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch with her cleaver raised like a victory banner. Rourke's eyes found Clara. "You!" he snarled. "This is your fault. If I hadn't what?" Clara stepped forward before she could think better of it. "If I hadn't stayed. If I hadn't helped. If I hadn't stood with people who actually care about something beyond profit." She crossed her arms. "You're right. It is my fault. And I'd do it again." "You're nothing," Rourke spat. "Just some abandoned bride playing house on someone else's ranch. You think Hart actually wants you? You think those girls actually—" Elias moved so fast the marshal barely caught him. "Say one more word about her, one more word about my daughters. I dare you." The marshal pulled Elias back. "He's not worth it, Hart. He's already done." "You're damn right I am," Elias said, breathing hard. "And you." He looked at Rourke with absolute contempt. "You've lost. The water cooperative's being filed today, the valley's standing together, and you're going to prison. That's how this ends." "For now," Rourke said. "But I've got lawyers. I've got money. I'll be back, and when I am—" "You'll be an old man, and we'll still be here," the blacksmith interrupted. "Living our lives, raising our children, working our land. You've got nothing we want, Rourke, nothing we need. You're already forgotten." The marshal nodded to his men. They led the prisoners away. Clara watched them go and felt something in her chest unclench for the first time in months. Maybe longer. Maybe since before Philadelphia. Maybe since her mother died, and the world became a place where people left and promises broke, and safety was just a pretty lie. But here in this valley, with these people, safety felt possible again. The celebration lasted into the evening. Someone produced a fiddle. The blacksmith's wife brought a jug of something that made people's eyes water and their laughter come easier. Food appeared from every wagon, smoked ham, fresh bread pies, and cakes and preserves. It was a feast built from nothing from people who'd learned to make abundance out of scarcity. Clara found herself passed from neighbor to neighbor, each one thanking her, welcoming her, claiming her as one of their own. Mary Morrison hugged her tight and promised the school would start next month. Doc Morrison shook her hand and said Laramie was lucky to have her. Even the blacksmith's teenage son stammered through an invitation to the Christmas dance, turning red when his mother swatted him and told him Miss Whitfield was spoken for. Clara didn't correct her. As darkness fell and the party began to wind down, Elias found Clara standing apart from the crowd watching the stars emerge. "Tired?" he asked. "Overwhelmed, in the best way." "Yeah, me too." He stood beside her, their shoulders not quite touching. Lot of changes coming, rebuilding the house, getting the cooperative running, starting the school. "Are you worried?" "No, not anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest even if the answer's no." Her heart started beating faster. "All right. The 2-week trial was supposed to end 6 weeks ago. We never talked about it, never made it official." He turned to face her. "So I'm asking now officially. Will you stay not as a governess on trial, as part of this family, as, he took a breath, as my partner, in the ranch, in raising the girls, in building something that lasts? Clara had known this was coming, had felt it building since that first day, since flower letters and Creek lessons, and the slow, careful way they'd learned to trust each other. But hearing him say it out loud still made her throat tight and her eyes sting. I'm not asking you to forget your past, Elias continued. I'm not asking you to pretend James never happened or that coming here wasn't born from heartbreak. I'm just asking if maybe heartbreak can turn into something else, something better. Are you asking me to marry you? Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Eventually, if you want. But for now, I'm just asking if you'll stay. As long as your heart says yes. No obligations, no expectations, just stay. Clara thought about the woman who'd stepped off the train in a wedding dress, certain she was unlovable, certain she'd failed at the one thing women were supposed to succeed at. She thought about James and his 9-word telegram and the life she'd planned that had vanished like smoke. Then she thought about June and Josie learning to read their fierce joy when they mastered something new. About Mrs. Chen's grudging respect earned through consistency and hard work. About the valley pulling together to face down a bully. About this man who'd offered structure instead of pity, partnership instead of rescue, truth instead of pretty lies. Yes, Clara said. I'll stay. As long as my heart says yes. Which, she smiled, I think might be a very long time. Elias's face transformed. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it anyway, right there in front of God and half the valley. Thank you for giving us a chance, for giving me a chance. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for trusting me with your daughters. For, her voice caught, for making me believe I was worth keeping. You were always worth keeping, Clara. You just needed to find people smart enough to recognize it. Behind them, someone wolf whistled. Clara turned to find the entire party watching, grinning like fools. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch, arms crossed, but even she was almost smiling. About time, the blacksmith's wife called out. We've been waiting for you two to figure it out for weeks. Way to make a man work for it, Miss Whitfield, Doc Morrison added, laughing. Clara felt her face go hot, but she didn't let go of Elias's hand. He didn't let go of hers either. Well, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, since you're all clearly invested in my personal business, I might as well make this official. Miss Clara Whitfield has agreed to stay on at Heart's Run, permanently, as my partner in all things. Does that mean we can call her Mama Clara? Josie's voice piped up from somewhere in the crowd. Elias looked at Clara, eyebrow raised. She nodded, eyes stinging again. You can call her whatever she's comfortable with, Elias said. But yes, Clara's family now. Official family. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in town. June and Josie pushed through the crowd and latched onto Clara like barnacles, both talking at once about what this meant, and could they start calling her Mama Clara right now, and would there be a wedding, and could they wear fancy dresses? Clara hugged them close and looked at Elias over their heads. He was watching her with an expression that made everything inside her go warm and steady and sure. This was home, not the house, not the land. These people, this moment, this choice to stay when staying was hard to fight, when fighting was dangerous to love, when loving meant risking everything. The party lasted until midnight. When the last wagon finally rolled away, and Mrs. Chen had retreated to her room, and the girls were asleep in their beds, Elias walked Clara to the bunkhouse one last time. You know, he said, you don't have to sleep out here anymore. We could, properly, after we're married. But even before that, you could take the spare bedroom. It's bigger than this. Warmer. I know, but I like this space. It's where I started over, where I learned to be the person I am now. Clara smiled. Besides, we're not married yet. Let's do this properly. Court me Elias Hart. Take me to that Christmas dance the blacksmith's son mentioned. Ask me formally when the time is right. Give the valley something to talk about besides water rights. He laughed. You want to be courted? I want to choose this. Not because I'm desperate or running from something, but because it's right. Because you're right. Because this family, she gestured toward the dark house, is right. I want to walk into marriage with my eyes open and my heart whole. Not as someone you rescued, but as someone who chose you right back. Fair enough. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, formal as a gentleman in a storybook. Then consider yourself officially courted, Miss Whitfield. I'll do this properly. Flowers, dinner, long walks, the whole business. I look forward to it. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. Good night, Elias. Good night, Clara. She watched him walk back to the house, his silhouette dark against the lamplight still burning in the windows. Then she went inside, locked the door, and sat on her narrow bed. The white wedding dress was still at the bottom of her trunk. Clara pulled it out one last time and held it up to the lamplight. It was still beautiful, despite the travel stains and the soot from the fire that had somehow reached even here. She thought about the woman who'd worn this dress with such hope, such certainty that love meant something specific, a man who wrote pretty letters, a promise of forever, a future built on someone else's terms. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, braver, more real. Someone who'd learned that love wasn't about being rescued or completing someone else. It was about standing together, fighting together, building something honest out of broken pieces. Clara folded the dress carefully one last time. Then she walked outside and carried it to the burn barrel where they'd been disposing of debris from the fire. Goodbye, she said softly, and dropped it in. The silk caught fire immediately, flames licking up white fabric like hungry fingers. Clara watched it burn, all those hours of work, all that hope, all that certainty about who she was supposed to be. When it was nothing but ash, she went back inside. Tomorrow she'd start planning a school curriculum for 8 children. She'd help Mrs. Chen inventory what needed replacing in the kitchen. She'd teach June and Josie long division and the dates of the Revolutionary War. She'd walk with Elias to check fence lines and help make decisions about spring planting. She'd be courted properly with flowers and long talks and the slow building of something meant to last. But tonight, she let herself rest in the knowledge that she'd found something she didn't even know she was looking for. Not a rescue, not a replacement for what she'd lost, just a home. Real and earned and chosen. The kind of home that didn't come from a telegram or a wedding dress or someone else's promise. The kind you built yourself one day at a time, with people who saw your worth even when you couldn't see it yourself. Clara Whitfield had arrived in Laramie, broken, certain she was unlovable, convinced she'd failed at the only future that mattered. But she'd been wrong. The dress with nowhere to go had finally found its address, not in ashes and ruin, but in the woman who'd worn it long enough to learn she didn't need it anymore. Home wasn't something given. It was something chosen. Something fought for. Something built from courage and community, and the radical decision to stay when leaving would be easier. And Clara had chosen to stay. Not for 2 weeks, not for a trial period, but for as long as her heart said yes, which she suspected would be the rest of her life. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.